So a very warm, big welcome to everybody who's joined today at the start of our first in its kind disability festival connected on ability, Inspire and Enable Disability Festival. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kez Hayat and I'm the Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at Bradford Teaching Hospitals. We have two speakers here with us today who I will introduce a bit more formally shortly. So we have Kirsten England, Chief Executive, Bradford Metropolitan Council, and we also have Mark Doughty from the King's Fund Trust. So thank you both to Kirsten and Mark for being here today and sharing with us your experiences, reflections and thoughts. So just a very quick overview in relation to how we've come about today in terms of the Disability Festival. So colleagues within Bradford and Craven District, equality leads, and also members of disability staff equality networks came together and had an initial discussion about how can we really focus on celebrating Disability History Month collectively. Now, we're all aware that in our respective organisations, we always focus on raising awareness. An International Day of Disability, etc., is one of them opportunities where we can raise awareness and we can have some of them discussions that are needed to have. So rather than all of us doing things individually, I'm really pleased to say that we're here today as a collective effort in some of them colleagues across the partnership who have come together to showcase the work that they are doing around disability equality in their organisations. And in some of them planning group meetings at the initial stages, it became really apparent that actually in our respective organisations, there's lots of good practice and really good work happening around disability equality. So this week, we've got a wide range of events that are taking place. As I say, the programme has been co-designed by colleagues with lived experiences of disability, specialist equality leads who have lots of professional background knowledge around these areas, but more importantly, looking at the impact and experiences of staff network members. May I ask colleagues, for those of you who are not on mute, please go on mute. That will really help us to have a smooth running of this session. Without any further ado, I'm going to bring in the wonderful Kirsten England. I'm sure most of you on the call will be aware of who Kirsten is. So Kirsten is the Chief Executive for Bradford Metropolitan Council and also the Executive Lead for tackling health inequalities for Bradford District and Craven Healthcare Partnership. And also, if I may, a leader who is absolutely committed to tackling inequalities in our communities, but also in our workplaces. Kirsten, thank you very much for giving your very busy time to us today. And without any further ado, over to you for any thoughts, reflections, observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Kez, and thank you for that glowing introduction. I'm not sure I justify it. Can I just say, you don't need to say thanks for making time in your very busy schedule. If I can't make time for this, what does it say, really? And I'm absolutely delighted to be here, actually, just to make clear the commitment, not just of myself, but of all of the chief executives and senior leaders across the health and care system. And I see Andrew Gold here also kind of has governance leadership in the health and care system. Just to make it really clear, our commitment to this agenda, it is significant, it is central. If we cannot make progress on this agenda, then we cannot serve our communities effectively. I also just want to make clear that the commitment is about taking an asset-based approach, because fundamentally this is actually about enabling people to be authentically who they are, to be seen, to be recognised, to be celebrated, and their skills, insight and experience to be fully utilised in our work as much as anything, so that we can properly serve our communities. And I want to just kind of say again, we want to take that asset-based approach, but I also want to say just how far we have to go on this whole agenda. Yeah, and actually I want to just start by sharing a small story from yesterday, which I think yesterday was the International Day of Disabilities, wasn't it? On, you know, much celebrated on social media, and many things being reflected and the experiences of people being talked about there. And as it happened, I was in Scotland with my 86-year-old father. Now, a number of members of my family, either through cerebral palsy or dementia or kind of later life mobility issues, have been kind of living with disabilities and experiencing the challenges that I'm sure many people on this call, on this session, will have experienced of navigating the world of benefits, of the care system, the health system, the wider issues around transport and just accessing everyday experiences that, inverted commas, the normal world, which is one of the big issues I have, you know, expect to just have of right. And as it happens, I'd booked to take my dad, who uses a wheelchair very effectively, out for a lunch, because he actually doesn't get to leave the residential care home he lives in very often. We booked a taxi, an hour and a half of ringing them and ringing them back. The taxi's coming, we can't find someone with the right kind of car. Ringing Uber assist, ringing them back. Oh, assist doesn't mean that we can put your wheelchair in the boot. You'll have to cancel the call. We eventually, after much patience from the restaurant, we cancelled the booking and we went out and got a takeaway and a bottle of wine for him, and we managed to use the lounge in the residential home. That, don't get me wrong, that's not the worst of the experiences, but it felt really ironic and poignant that on his birthday, International Day of Disabilities, a small thing that we had planned to do became completely impossible, and we spent an hour and a half sitting in the lobby of the care home. He was an architect, so we're talking about the design of the wheelchair and how, you know, unaesthetically pleasing they are, and can't they just design them in colours even, right? It's a small example, but it's I have much experience at one remove of some of the experiences of people. You know, the world is full of obstacles. It's not that the people, you know, are unable to take part in the world. It's that we don't make it possible. And to say that 1 in 5 of our population are living with disabilities, I just reflect how far we have to go. The levels of discrimination and inequity that persist. And in my own world, you know, I was thinking around education and how underfunded the special educational needs and disability services are across local government as a whole. All of us are absolutely struggling to ensure that children with disabilities get an equitable opportunity to flourish as children in a good education system. I think about employment, you know, and the numbers of people now not in the workforce after COVID because of, you know, long COVID, chronic conditions, disabilities, and making choices, and often choices which are to live in levels of poverty. I was thinking about the cost of living crisis and all the evidence we're seeing about the fact that people with disabilities are the ones who are most vulnerable, who can't afford to put the heating on and can't afford not to have heating on. People particularly with limited circulation or chronic conditions that require a level of warmth, they're just going to face a really, really difficult winter. I was sadly thinking about the, you know, health and life expectancy of people with disabilities, and those are stark and shocking statistics. People, particularly people with learning disabilities, whose life expectancy on average is much, much less, even than people living in socioeconomic difficulty. It's shocking. It shouldn't be happening in the 5th most affluent country in the world. And as I said, some of the access to the basic pleasures of life are denied by the obstacles that are thrown up by the way our world is constructed. it's also pretty sobering to look at the rise in hate crimes towards people with disabilities. So I think it's, there is conscious, unconscious discrimination, the lack of designing in, lack of considering, lack of building and bringing people into the heart of our conversations about the way our services should be working, our world should be working. So coming to us, as Kez said, there is a huge commitment to this agenda. There's a huge commitment around social justice, equality, diversity, inclusion, and tackling health. But of course, there is. You can see the work that is being put in place, whether beyond commitment statements, which are about policies, the way that we design work, the space and time that we give to supporting people with different and lived experiences that we need to build into the heart. You can see all that, and you can see the commitment around working from the social model of disability. So understanding this is about the way organisations are designed to run. It is not about the people with disabilities. But can I say we're only scratching the surface? I think, that's why I say if I couldn't make time for this, why I can't make time for some of the most important things. I've been very struck by, Kez referenced the staff networks that many of us have across our organisations, and they regularly meet with my management team, and it's been pretty sobering to have put in front of us, you say these things, here is the lived experience, and here is where the rubber hits the road and it doesn't deliver, yeah. We have a burgeoning staff network with very articulate individuals who have come and put before us some of the issues around the clunky IT that doesn't get delivered, doesn't have the right things loaded, doesn't respond to the particular needs of people, that is a homogenised, one size fits all, this is what you get sort of approach. We've heard, issues around the design of work, the flexibility that is shown. I mean, it's clear how crucial good management is in this, because where it's great, we have kind, compassionate, flexible management going on, which enables everybody in a team's strengths to be fully utilised. And where that's not happening, and it's bureaucratic and compliance-led, then you can see some really kind of dispassionate, is that the right word? Well, anyway, not compassionate management, whatever the reverse of that is. So actually management education, training and support alongside people with lived experience is absolutely crucial, because all the policies in HR you can pick up and read don't translate necessarily into good management practice. But fundamentally for me, it is about enabling us all to bring our whole selves to work, being who we are, being our authentic selves, talking about our lives, not just the kind of what we are per job description and role, being who we are, being valued for who we are, and being recognised and appreciated, and our experiences being utilised. And that goes then to the necessity, which is across all agendas, to create healthy workplaces, which isn't just about work on disability, it is about work across all of the experiences and lived experiences that people bring to work, and taking that holistic approach. Because actually, as you know, we are all multiple beings, aren't we? I'm a woman who's Scottish, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. I have many different roles and identities, and the same is true for people with disabilities. Your lived experience is patterned with so many other dimensions which can give you further challenges or enable you to do certain things or not do certain things. So healthier workplaces, flexible working, adjustments that are made, building the lived experience of our employees, of us, into the everyday work we do, because that is also how we will transform and change the quality of services that we provide for the people that we're here for, the residents, the citizens, the communities of the Bradford district and Craven. And I want to make that journey, and I want to make it with you, and I want to hear your experiences. And Kez, at that point, I'm going to hand back to you. I've spoken for long enough, and I'd really like to hear from Mark.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. That was really powerful, actually, and a lot of what you were saying there, Kirsten, really resonated. You know, you gave your example of your father there and some of the challenges. And as a father of a son with a complex condition myself, that really resonated. But also, I just want to touch on the point, Kirsten, that you made about inclusive, compassionate leaders and managers who have that understanding and the flexibility is absolutely crucial. Because I do believe that we as society often put the barriers in place, and that needs to change. I often give an example of when it's the wheelie bins day and everybody decides to put the wheelie bins onto the pavements. And then having a son with a visual impairment, that's one of his biggest bear bugs when he's going out for his taxi and he can't get past because of the wheelie bins. But it's also very challenging for mothers who have baby pushchairs, for example, because again, so that intersectionality you've talked about, Kirsten, absolutely resonates, and absolutely valid points there. And I think having your support and people who know me, I often talk about demonstrable commitment from our leaders is absolutely crucial. And I'm sat here thinking we have an amazing leader who gives us that demonstrable commitment to this agenda. So thank you once again, Kirsten, for your input there. So without any further ado, I would now like to introduce Mark Doughty. Mark is a senior consultant who works in leadership and organisational development and works for the King's Fund. Obviously, Mark is here today to share his lived experiences, and I won't go into any further detail because I know Mark's got an amazing input to share with you there. Over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Kez, and thanks so much, Kirsten, for what you said. And there's going to be a crossover between, as you can imagine, some of the things Kirsten said and some of the things I'm going to say, because there's some universal points there when it comes to our experiences as disabled people or people who live with people with disabilities. I also want to say right at the start, I'm very conscious that get it right for people with disabilities and you get it right for all your workforce. And I think be conscious of what I'm saying, because it is right to so easily say, and isn't this the case for other groups, other people in our workplace? And I would go, absolutely. And particularly because of the stance I'm going to take with what I'm going to say. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak at the start of your first Disability Festival. And by the way, I so like the title, Connected on Ability, Inspire and Enable. Energizing words full of hope and inspiration. And for those of us who have lived many years with a disability, we will know our experiences in those early days, and it's still hardwired that develop a disability, have a disability, and it's so often about less than. So Kirsten's focus on asset-based is so critical. But then it's critical for all staff, all people, isn't it? I first developed my long-term condition, my disability, back in my mid-20s, many years ago now. And I'm one of the 83% of the population of people who identify as disabled who became disabled during their working lives. And at the time, there was no such thing as a disability festival. Oh, if only there was. I cannot say how inspirational the content of your festival is. And I think you've just landed it just right, some of the balance of things that you've got in that festival. And I was looking at all of them and thinking, in those early days, if only this had been available for me. Because for me, my experience of developing a life-changing condition was a real emotional roller coaster. And I'm going to talk about it from the moment I returned back to work. I'm not going to go into the experiences of developing my health condition and managing that in my general life, and the experience of that. I'm gonna talk about what happened when I went back to work, because it was when I went back to a different workplace. So I left education and I went into healthcare. So I went back into a different workplace, but what I didn't go back to was the old me. I didn't go back to the me that I was before the development of my disability. And it was a real surprise. I knew things had changed for me, but I was still surprised about what had happened. My lack of confidence, my lack of self-esteem, my lack of self-image, my lack of self-belief, which I thought I was handling, really came to the forefront when I was back in the workplace. And I noticed I seemed to be judged against standards, benchmarks, and I think, Kirsten, you mentioned it, about what was considered normal. And I was aware that this wasn't normal for me. But the other thing was, and this is really important in those early days, yes, there were barriers put up around things like physical barriers and people's attitudes and things like that. But I was also very conscious of nobody could have been a harsher critic than I was on myself. And I think that's something that is was part of my journey, and the people I've worked with who either have a disability or a long-term condition and have recently become disabled is that thing about nobody is a harsher critic on ourselves often than we are, and it's supporting and helping us to manage that. And that's why the fantastic thing about networks, and we'll come on to that at the moment, is support groups and peer support groups are so essential in the workplace for people. So in some ways, I created internal walls in order for me to function and survive in the workplace. And those internal walls, unconsciously and not designed to, excluded myself as well. So there's this thing going on between being excluded by the very nature of the workplace, because this was a workplace that was not inclusive. It was in, we're talking in a part of the country and in a time in the late 80s where maybe there wasn't that awareness now. So it wasn't an inclusive workplace, really. There wasn't much around disability awareness. And in order to survive and manage that, I had to keep myself safe as well. So I put up my own barriers. I excluded myself as well. So I want to talk about inclusivity, particularly from the perspective of the lived experience of somebody with a disability, very quickly. And I want to pick out 4 lessons or insights I've gained through my own experiences and working with others. And this is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. Absolutely not. So one of the first insights I've gained is that inclusion and inclusivity goes beyond the creation of policies, strategies, procedures to enact disability-related legislation. Do not get me wrong, right? That is critical. That is essential. It has to be in place, right? But we got to go beyond that. It's about developing a disability confident culture. It's about inclusivity is a disability confident culture. And if that's something to explore what that means and what it's looked like, when you join events, you will witness and experience the events during this week, people talking from that place. So staff in a disability confident culture means that people with long-term conditions and disabilities are treated equitably. They feel sense of being a part of belonging to, and valued by the organization or the place they work at. They feel a part of, they feel they belong to, they feel valued by. And those are the conversations we need to have. Because what does that mean and what does that look like? And this is where conversations need to be had, because we cannot make assumptions. Leaders and designers of policy cannot make assumptions that they understand what it really means to be part of and belonging to and valued to an organization if you are living with a long-term condition or conditions and a disability. You can't, right? Even if you're supporting and helping, of course you've got a really powerful insight compared to others, but to truly understand what it means requires something else I'm going to come on to in a minute. So the second insight or lesson I want to suggest is underpinning inclusion is, and this is the thing that you're going to say, well, yeah, okay, Mark, it's not rocket science, is it? But it's about relationships. Fundamentally, it's about relationships. It was about my relationship with myself. I had to go on a journey with myself to understand what it meant now that I understood that I had a long-term condition and I was disabled. I was no longer like the person I was. I needed over time to accept and to acknowledge, and that was part of my journey as well. But also relationships, as I said, for me, they come before results and performance. And I know organizations need to focus on their outputs and their outcomes. But again, it's about getting the relationships right in the first place in order to enable us to deliver the service, whatever that is, to support. And that relies on relationships. And I make no apology for saying that's something that we need to focus on much more and make more explicit. If we practice acts of inclusion based upon really focusing on the quality of our relationships and what it means to be in a relational workplace, supporting everybody, but particularly people with disabilities, then we release and unlock pent-up energy, creativity, and power from people that feel seen and heard and included and belonging. And I've witnessed it. I've experienced it. I've been part of it. You talk to people who are running sessions this week. They will share experiences of that and the difference it's made. Get our relationships right, invest the time and energy, and I would argue results and performance follows. We put relationships at the heart of everything we do. And those of us who are part of the NHS and the health sector are aware of, we put patients at the center of everything we do. Well, I think we should put our people at the heart of everything we do. And that means we put people with disabilities at the heart of everything we do. Relationship. The third thing that's emerged for me is relationships in connection is built on our individual and our collective ability to empathize. I would say to all of us that empathy is sometimes it's the most talked about quality and attribute of individuals, but we never go the extra thing which says, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that show up in our day-to-day interactions? Empathy, to truly emotionally understand, doesn't happen by accident. A culture of trust, respect, and safety needs to be cultivated in the workplace to enable disabled people to feel valued and belonged, and everybody to feel valued and belonged. For disabled staff to bring their authentic selves to work, time and space needs to be given to help them develop their personal and professional selves in the workplace. So helping people to develop their self-awareness and understanding, helping your colleagues and yourselves to reveal individual and collective blind spots and biases, and being open and acknowledging that blind spots and biases are there. We all have them. We all have them. As long as we can acknowledge that, as it only becomes a weakness when we go into denial and somehow we think we're special and different and we don't have biases and we don't have blind spots. To acknowledge we have blind spots and biases is to acknowledge our vulnerability and to acknowledge to be authentic and true to ourselves. And that gives such a strong message to people who feel marginalized and isolated and different, to realize that, yes, you are really hearing and listening to them. My fourth point is developing an inclusive culture requires support. It requires networks. It requires connections. It requires people working together. And looking at this week's program, I was so pleased to see that networks were in there and that people who are involved in those networks were part of the design and the instigators of this whole week. Networks were the lifesaver for me. Networks helped me find my voice. Networks helped me find my confidence. Networks provided the safe space for me to show up as a disabled person in the workplace. Finally, I just want to say, sorry, I forgot. The other thing that really helped with the networks was allyship. And guess what I saw on this week? Allyship. Loved it. Absolutely. Networks, allyship. The other thing in this week, which I'm going to come to, which I am so pleased is there, is everybody's journey with their disability is their journey. It takes longer for others than it does for some. And that needs to be honored and understood and accepted. And you're not wrong. And there's no perfect answer. In the early days, if you had told me I was disabled, I would have absolutely gone ballistic with you. Because to be disabled was seen as a weakness, was seen as less than. Why? Because that was the culture in which going into a world, that's how it was perceived, right? My moment of change was when I was introduced to social model of disability. Everybody, please, if you go to one session this week, go to the social awareness session, the social model week. I'm guessing it's going to be about the social model. I'm looking at on this. Yes, I've got nods, right? Go to that, because for me, that was my aha moment when I realized that, yes, I had a long-term condition and I was disabled by the world in which I was trying to navigate through, whether that were the physical barriers, whether that was people's attitudes and beliefs. And I realized that it had nothing to do with personal weakness. And that was the moment that I could own and honor and have part of my identity. I'm a person with a disability. I'm a disabled person. And again, it's up to you how you want to use that title or use that terminology. But it's part of a conversation. The great thing is to have a conversation about it anyway. And until that, there was no way I was going to acknowledge in my workplace that I was disabled. So the two things went hand in hand. Me being able to honor and identify as being disabled in a space where I felt safe and heard and listened to and I belonged and respected, then I was going to put my hand up and go, I'm disabled. I can identify. I can so there's a session on that as well, I see, which is fantastic. So I'm going to stop now. I just want to say that I just want to reinforce, if this festival had been around in those early days, it would have so helped me in bringing my full authentic self into the workplace, giving of myself, giving of my energy and my aspirations and my commitment to the workplace. And a festival like this just has the potential to absolutely be a game changer in the development of an inclusive culture. So congratulations, and fantastic. I'll stop there.
Mark, thank you. Thank you so much there, Mark. Them great words of wisdoms and your lived experience, which sounds really, really powerful. And as you was talking, Mark, I've made a few notes in which really resonated with me. And I really liked about getting the relationships right. I think that's absolutely key. You talked collective ability on empathizing, and again, that's absolutely crucial. You talked about the social model of disability, and again, I make reference to, often as society, we put them barriers in place, and I think the social model of disability really allows us to look at that. You talked about your own personal experiences, Mark, in terms of your input and your membership of joining networks and the role of networks and the power of them networks. And that was really, really reassuring to hear, Mark, and I'm sure colleagues on the call have found your input there very helpful as well. I am really conscious of the time. We've got some great 1 or 2 comments in the chat as well. Sessions will be recorded and they will be getting sent out with further details around all of the different sessions. So I want to really open it up now to the audience that we have on the call for any direct questions, both to either Kirsten or Mark. Please make use of the chat as well, but also if you want to raise your hands, then I will bring you in. Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. If you want to come in and direct your question to either Kirsten or Mark, thank you.
It was really more a comment. I just want to share an experience I had on World Disability Day with the group, and Kirsten particularly. I went out for lunch with a friend into a cafe local to me. There's not very many places I can get into because quite a lot of the cafes and restaurants in my local town have steps up into them, and that's fine, but this one didn't. I thought, great, we'll go in here, it'll be lovely. Obviously eating and drinking then requires to need to use the facilities, so I scooted on my little electric scooter into the huge toilet, which was fantastic. Noted that it had these alarm calls with a pull cord, no cord, but it had the alarm, and absolutely no handholds or equipment that you would expect to see in a toilet that would be suitable for people with disabilities or those that are slightly unsteady on their feet, elderly people who need a bit of a push up from the toilet. That meant that my dining companion had to physically lift me off the toilet. Now, he's a good friend, but he's not that kind of friend, and he's not my carer. And when I challenged the manager and said, you've got a fantastically sized disabled toilet, why haven't you got any of the, the handholds and the fold down thing for people to push up from? And he said, well, environmental health told us we didn't need to. So, well, but that means that disabled people can't come and use your facilities. So that's what I got, a shrug. So for environmental health to tell somebody, a new business owner, that they don't need to put in equipment to cater for 20% of the population is shocking. And I will be raising it with environmental health at some point when I have a 20-minute slot for a conversation with them. So I just wanted to share that also, ironically, on Day of Disability.
Day of Disability.
Yeah, it's like, yay.
Joe, can I just ask, was that in Bradford?
No, it wasn't, because I work remotely. I actually live near Yarm in near Stockton. So it was actually Yarm. So it's not your patch, I'm afraid.
No, it's all right. But well, yes, it's saying thank goodness. But I will also just make sure that that we are giving the right advice, because it's those little things are absolutely crucial. Believe me, every cafe I've been to in the last 10 years with both parents, I've had to pre-recce all of those things.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
Because they can make or break your ability to actually go there.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And it was convenient that I happened to have a friend with me, but quite often I like to go for a coffee on my own, and then I would have been stuck.
No, yeah, exactly. And for parents to have exactly the same thing happen with one of their children having to do that is, you get over it, but it's not what your parents want. Exactly.
It's disabling. Yeah, I felt much more disabled by that experience than I had felt up to that point.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So that was all. It wasn't really a question. It was just a sharing of it, and also an ironical experience on World Disability Day.
No, thank you for sharing that, Joe. I think that's a great example to share of when businesses and organisations completely tunnel vision in what they are developing or doing, and it's, for me, it's about. So we've just had a conversation in our organisation about, when we're changing reception areas or when we're introducing restrooms for our staff, the importance of conducting that equality impact assessment right from the onset. And I'm just so pleased to say that with some of that focus here in my organisation, we're really allowing to identify what that negative impact is for disabled people, even in terms of changing a reception area, for example. So yeah, that's a really helpful example. Okay, is there excuse me, is there anybody else on the call with a question, comment, or any observation? Yes, I can see a hand. So I will bring in Mary and Naylor. Over to you.
Hi, I just thank you both to both the speakers. Firstly, I just wanted to ask. You talked about like a disability confident culture, and I think we are getting quite good with all the protections in educating staff around those areas. But how can we go that little bit further and create that confidence? Because I think that's the difference, isn't it? We have an awareness. How do we move forward and build the confidence, really?
Thanks, Marianne. I think do what you're doing, and do more of it, which is, I think confidence comes from familiarity, and it comes from it being part of the everyday conversation. It becomes and it's visible, and you're hearing from people, and you're seeing people talk as if they have a right to be in the conversation as much as anybody else, and I think that's part of what it's all about for me. So a festival like this is the start, because the great thing is, yes, it's a celebration and we'd want more of this, but for somebody like me, it would be fantastic when the content that's in this festival is also there on a daily basis in the workplace. And I'm not saying there's never a place for a festival, because of course there is. Of course there's a place for a celebration, but it's also about what is in this festival that is could be and should be there in everyday conversations. Like staff, what's happening this afternoon, supporting staff in terms of looking about reasonable adjustments and accommodation for people with disabilities. There will become a time when that's just second knowledge. So, it's just common. It's just part of what they know. It's not something that's extra and different that they need to be educated in, or they might be when they first come to the organisation, but then it's just second nature. So confidence is about familiarity, and it's part of this is just the way we do things.
Can I come in, Kez? Because I completely, I completely agree with Mark, and also because I've got to go and open another event at 11. I'm really sorry about this. I think I'd go back to the central point that Mark was making throughout his first presentation about the relational aspect of our work, because this is about human relationships, and I think it is about being curious about who people are that you work with, about the whole of who they are, yeah? And I know from talking to lots of people, people get anxious about that. They think they might be seen as intrusive. They think they might get it wrong. They don't always make time for it because it seems to get in the way of the focus on the task. But actually, Mark made the central point, which is actually enabling us all to give of our best means building really good, strong, open relationships with one another and talking about our lives. And one of the things that we had a conversation with my senior team about was we have done a lot of work showcasing the lived experience of different people from networks, but actually we're still not entirely budging the anxiety some people have about self-identifying. And so we've had a conversation about ourselves, right? So, you know, 2, possibly 3 of my team have got disabilities around the senior management team. 2 of us are LGBTQ+, right? 3 are Black, Asian or minority. And we need to talk about us and say, you know, we're not some remote, you know, superhuman senior management team, far from it. We're very fallible and but we all have insights and experiences we're carrying into this. So I think there is something about more people at every level coming out in all senses, coming out and giving that permission. So, and then it's the deep listening a good manager will do, right? So that you know, I know some managers are worried they're going to be intrusive on people's personal lives, and you need to listen first to see how much the person wants to open up, send the right signals that it's fine to talk about what's gone on your weekend, the challenges you've had, Joe. Do you see what I mean? Being able to share that makes a huge difference to the kind of our human operating in the workplace. I'm sorry, I'm going on at a bit length, but I was just very struck by the question, Marianne, because I think it's a really good question, and the fact that it goes back to what Mark was saying. You know, it's about being human with one another in the workplace. At which point, I am really sorry, Kez and Mark and everybody on the call, because I do have to run across town to open a conference in another venue. But have a fantastic festival. It does look great. I just wish, to go back to what Mark said, we'd done it 2 decades ago. I do. But we are here now, so let's celebrate that we're here now.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Some great input there, some real words of wisdom and some great, you know, demonstrable leadership commitment. And, you know, we will give you a full report of the Disability Festival in terms of some of them things. So thank you for your time again, Kirsten, and we will catch up with you later. Take care. I just want to go into some of the comments that have come into chat. There's one in particular, if I may. Mark, this might be directed at you, and I think it focuses around hidden disabilities, which is also a really crucial, important area, I feel. So May is saying that she loved Mark's point about safe spaces and opening up about being disabled. Would either speaker be prepared to talk about the importance of availability of mental health support for the workplace for people with disabilities, mental health disabilities, sorry, I've lost my finger there, where is it? Oh. Mental health disabilities, those who have faced discrimination, but also the workforce as a whole, but also particularly when disability is not visible. Any immediate feedback there, Mark?
So I'm just trying.
Yeah, the comments in the chat.
I'm just reading what. Yeah. I think hidden disabilities and particularly mental health in the workplace is, and I'm guessing that this will be part of the topic that's going to take place during this week under the session around hidden disabilities. I think that it's one of the most critical issues I come across when I'm working with people who are really thinking about how do they show up in the workplace, how can they show up in the workplace and be themselves in their workplace, particularly if their condition is hidden, right, on the basis that it cannot be seen, and how do they get their support. And I think I know it feels like I'm just repeating myself, but the opportunity to feel safe enough to join a network that is saying, look, here's what we're talking about, here's what we're supporting, here's what we are working with, please come along. If you can, if it feels safe for you to do so, then a network that does that, and which I'm absolutely certain that you will have here, a particular network that focuses on hidden disabilities, is a real benefit to have. So I would just say, if you can, find people to talk to and share your experiences. If you are not at that stage, there will be support in your organization to have a conversation about your experiences. There will be support. And if you can find somebody, just one person that you can say, look, I need support with this, and you can open up, and they're within a network, or they're within the support of the disability world in your organization, they will point you in the right direction. It's a very convoluted way of saying that. Please find a way of speaking about it.
Thank you, Mark. Again, some great advice there. One of the things we've done, Mark, in our organisation, because we've been really keen to raise the profile of disability equality. We know we've got disabled staff, we know we've got staff with long-term health conditions, but we know that those same staff do not declare that level of information or inform the managers for whatever reason. So one of the things we've done is developed a video which is about 6 minutes long, and it involves 6 people who talk positively about their disability, but more importantly, how they've been supported by their organisation, by their manager. And what we're finding is that that's having a bit of a positive impact. Every time we share it with a group of staff, people are openly talking about disability and a long-term health condition. So I think you're absolutely right. There's something about, having them conversations, but obviously the culture has to be right, doesn't it, in organisations, for staff to have openly in a safe way in terms of raising some of their issues as well. And networks are a key way and an opportunity in terms of doing that, because I do believe networks are about influencing their lived experiences to make things better and to improve things.
Kez, can I also say there's something about, so Kirsten said something really profound for me, that in her senior team, they provide the time and the space for every individual in that team to bring themselves to the workplace, to their team, to share their experiences of their identity. Okay, we might drop down to a task-based team, right? That's implementing a policy or a procedure or a practice. But the number of times I hear people say, we don't have time to build our relationships. We don't have time to sit around a task-based meeting and actually bring ourselves into the room. My challenge is, I know it might sound flippant, but we don't not have time to do that? And actually creating some time and space, reframing, it's amazing how much can get done in terms of meeting and exchanging and talking differently if you do reframe your meetings and do share experiences of yourself in those meetings. And of course, getting to know people in ways like that then also has the potential to cut down time later on as problems and potential issues get change. They get short circuited because they get cut off because you actually know people differently. So for me, that ability to build relationships on task-based focused groups is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Absolutely, Mark. You're absolutely right. I'm just conscious of the time. We've got 3 minutes left for this call. I'm just wondering, anybody in the audience with any final comments, observations, reflections from anybody else? I'd like to use a minute or so just to finalise the session. Really, I think this has been really insightful session. Mark, your insight and your input has been absolutely helpful. I've made a note of everything that you've said because I absolutely agree with everything that you've said about disability, and your experiences obviously sounds really, really powerful. So thank you to Mark and Kirsten again for their time today.